Happy Wednesday. IB Nation Sports Talk is up and rolling. Trevor Trowbridge checked out of one show and he jumps into another along with me. Sean Stires, glad to have you with us here today. You are you look like you're invigorated, you're fresh, you're ready to roll right now.
I am. I'm in a great mood. It's Wednesday. We're one day closer to game day. We just finished moving, so we are no more back and forth. So I think this is the first night in about 5 days that I can just, after the shows, after work is done, I can just finally relax in this apartment. So it's good vibes over here in the Trowbridge household, man. How you doing?
Nice. Doing well.
Good.
Doing well. Great day of, I was watching a little, not that I'm a Tigers fan or a Guards fan, but I see that Father David coming right in with how about them Tigers doing pretty well this afternoon in the first of 4 Major League Baseball playoff games going on today. They got all 4 series today. So it's a busy slate of baseball. It's just what I love being able to kick back and watch a playoff game while I'm doing some other stuff, getting ready for the show or writing some stuff up. And we had some baseball last night. We got Royals Yankees, I think is the 7:00 game. It's like, I think they're staggering them every 2 hours. Tigers Guards was 3:00. I believe Phillies Mets is 5:00. Royals Yankees at 7:00. And then of course you got the West Coast game, the Dodgers and the Padres, I think a little after 9:00. So all day long, baby.
There we go.
All day long. Yes. It is Mailbag Day. So as you're filing in, 1, hit the like button, of course. I mean, that's a given at this point. But 2, shoot us your questions in the chat and we will get to them. Before we take some of the questions, we were just talking before we started, and according to the Stanford Daily, Stanford head coach Troy Taylor has updated a couple of injuries, including the one to quarterback Ashton Daniels, who missed Stanford's game last week, their lopsided loss to Virginia Tech. But Taylor said that Daniels is going to be available for this game. He injured his leg 2 weeks ago or 2 games ago against Clemson, missed last week's game against Virginia Tech. So a pretty significant recovery if he is, actually able to go out there. Vince and I touched on him some yesterday, Trevor. I mean, this is a guy, it's 250 yards and he's the quarterback, but he's, not quite in the same vein as Riley Leonard, but in terms of what he means to their running game, he's leading the Cardinal in rushing right now. And it's pretty much their offense has gone as he goes so far. So pretty significant if they get him back this Saturday.
Yeah, I agree. Ashton, that entire offense runs through him. I don't know if anybody watched the Stanford Virginia Tech game last weekend, but there is virtually zero passing game without Ashton Daniels in.
Yeah.
1. 2, Ashton Daniels to that offense is what Riley Leonard meant to Duke in 2023. And the offense can't move the ball without him. He's a dynamic playmaker. He leads the team in rushing attempts and rushing yards. It is worth noting that I think Stanford only has 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, both by way of their backup quarterback. And it's because they come in and they bring out in the backup in like short down and distance scenarios. So that is worth noting. I know that one of their running backs, Micah Ford, he's an explosive kid. He's not going to be playing on Saturday. He's doubtful. He injured his foot or a lower leg injury on like the last drive of the game against Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is unfortunate news. But
yep.
Ashton Daniels playing for Stanford is going to be big for them.
Yeah, there were a couple others. Safety, Jay Green, he is out. He also was injured against Clemson. And then Taylor did not update their center, Levi Rogers, who left last week's game against Virginia Tech with an injury. And their offensive line is already not very good. So it'd be pretty significant if they lose their starting center as well.
Yeah, Levi Rogers was arguably their best offensive lineman coming back. And I think it was midway through the second quarter, he left the game with a lower leg injury, and then he returned to the sideline in crutches and a boot. So I would be shocked if he was good to play. I think one of the reasons why they're not disclosing what's happening, in my opinion, is their backup center right now is currently listed as their starting left guard. So I think there could be some shuffling around on the offensive line. If I were a betting man, I think it's going to look a little bit different on Saturday for Stanford. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that Taylor even updated the status of Daniels.
Yeah.
In the yesterday. Like I would just, he's injured. You don't have any reason to say anything. You're going on the road. You're taking on obviously a ranked team, a team that sits just outside the top 10. I guess give him credit. He's obviously the anti-Harbaugh. He's not afraid to talk about injuries, but I was a little shocked that he did any update. I just would have kept it as close to the vest as possible if I were Taylor and Stanford.
I would have as well. I think there's a reason why they haven't released their depth chart yet. So I think that's going to be interesting for sure.
Yep, absolutely. All right, again, it's mailbag night, so we've got a few questions lining up. Go ahead and get yours in as well in the live chat right now, and we will get to them. Joe Allen was sitting here with a couple of fresh questions ready to go when we logged in tonight from Joe. Fill in the blank. The biggest accomplishment Notre Dame can achieve this game is blank.
Opening up their pass game. Honestly, we talked about it in some previous shows, but Stanford has one of the worst pass defenses in the country statistically. Notre Dame needs to start opening up the passing game because now we are coming up to the point in the season where we start to talk about what the playoffs are going to start looking like for certain teams. We're not there yet. I think this next 3-week stint for Notre Dame until their next bye is going to be huge for evaluating where this team is at. And we're going to start getting into the home stretch here. Notre Dame does still have the bulk of their season remaining, but I think the biggest accomplishment will be watching the passing game open up. Now, don't confuse that with statistics, because if Notre Dame just shows up and plays their B game, they're beating Stanford by double digits, in my opinion. But if it looks efficient and Riley Leonard finishes, there's a chance Riley Leonard's not playing this game in the fourth quarter. Guys, let's just be real about this. If Notre Dame shows up and plays the way that they should, right?
I'm just hesitant to jump to that conclusion. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
We all thought that. We were talking about how it was all supposed to line up and stack up against Northern Illinois, and obviously, that didn't happen. And even games at, people were asking about that in Miami, and even though they looked much better, obviously, against Miami than they looked against Northern Illinois and won the game, it still never turned into a game that was comfortable enough, for them to get Angeli or, whatever reserves in there. So I'm just this to me, I would echo what you're saying. This gives them a chance for people who need a more balanced offense and all that kind of stuff. And let's be honest, we all obviously want to see more from the passing game. And Mike Denbrock said yesterday he wants to see more from the passing game, but he also thinks that he's going to start to see more from the passing game. But because of what this Stanford team is defensively, there are going to be plenty of opportunities. And I think that what this game accomplishes, the biggest thing they can accomplish is, even if it's not a 66-7 game like Purdue a few weeks ago, even if they score 40 plus points in this game, it's like a 40 whatever to 7 game, 45 to 7, whatever it happens to be. This to me is the first step toward, and I think you kind of touched on it, showing that you are an actual playoff contender, taking care handily of, let's be honest, what is a much inferior opponent. That's what Stanford is, not just on paper. That's what they are. They're still a work in progress. And
right.
And there is no excuse for Stanford to be able to come into Notre Dame Stadium this weekend and have the outcome end up being anything less, I think, than like a 4-touchdown victory for Notre Dame. So
I agree.
That's the thing that they can accomplish is you want to kind of put some of this negative talk behind you, show you can go out and take care of business in a very efficient, very obvious way against an opponent that you should be able to put away.
I agree. And now I do think that Notre Dame is going to have more ranked opponents down the road if they continue to win out. Two of the service schools you got to throw in there. Potentially USC could sneak their way back into the top 25. But as of right now, Notre Dame doesn't have any ranked opponents left on their schedule. So not only do you have to go out and win, you now have to win convincingly because on paper, your hardest games are behind you. So you're going to have to go out and really, it can't just be a 28-3 win against a significantly inferior opponent. You need to go out and be dominant on all phases of the game.
Yes, absolutely. Clean up some of the, just look like a much sharper team. You know, that's, I think you and I were talking about it on Monday. That's something Marcus Freeman talked about, cleaning up the mistakes, cleaning up some of the mental errors, those kind of things. And this is just the first step. You've got a built-in reset, refresh button coming out of the bye week. Show you can do it now. That to me is the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Connor, how confident are you in a clean sweep for the Irish before the next bye week? So that's obviously Stanford this week, Georgia Tech next week, Navy the week after that. Scale of 1 to 10, Trevor, confidence.
I mean, scale of 1 to 10, confidence. I'm going to put it at a 7. A conservative 7, because look, Marcus Freeman has the opportunity to beat what is already his current active win streak. I think his best win streak at Notre Dame so far has been 5 games in a row. Marcus Freeman, historically, he is 3-0 off of the bye, but has had real big fumbles and mistakes the game after coming off of the bye. So we're going to see. On paper, Notre Dame should go 3-0 in between the first and second bye on paper, but Georgia Tech poses some certain threats. And then it's Navy right before the next bye, which as of right now, Notre Dame's rush defense is not the best in the world. And that's what Navy does really well. So I would say my confidence right now is a 7 out of 10. What about you?
No, I mean, that's fair with Navy. The difference with Navy is, like what I think has given Notre Dame some issues from the running standpoint is some of the eye candy and some of the motions and things like that. And that stuff Stanford will do this week, so it's like, again, like from a defensive standpoint, it's a chance to clean some of that up, where at least with Navy and obviously with Army as well, even though it's triple option and they make their bread and butter on running, at least like there's a lot less deception involved. It just, it's as basic as, can you read your keys? Like, I don't know. Did you ever play against Mishawaka when you were in high school? Did you ever have the honor of doing that?
So we didn't, but we played Plymouth High School, who ran the veer.
Okay. So not a whole lot different. Well, I mean, wrinkles, but yeah, I mean, obviously there's veer in Mishawaka's offense as well. I mean, assignment football. So like, Navy's good. They're taking care of business. But I think that like Al Golden has shown, especially last year, that he can defend the triple option. And so I don't think that is going to be a major issue. So my confidence at the end of the day is an 8. I'm pretty confident. I don't want them to give me any reason, to make that a 6. Coming out of, like even if they win Saturday, don't drop my confidence from 8 to a 6 by not doing some of the things that we just talked about against Stanford.
Totally. I hear you.
Okay. We've got all kinds of questions popping in here right now. Connor also had this one. I don't know if you follow hockey at all. Nashville Predators starting the road to the Stanley Cup. No, me either.
I don't follow hockey. Sorry, man.
I do not either. Okay, so Andrew's kind of going double barrel here, and it's a little bit recruiting related. Okay. I don't know how into the recruiting you are, so I don't know how deep we can get on this. I will just say, okay, so Andrew says Emmett Mosley Jr. looks pretty good. Too bad we didn't close him. Again, like touching on some recruiting. He's another example of why Notre Dame's receiver coach is so frustrating. This is the question, I think, from Andrew. How come we can't get Micah Gilbert or Williams on the field? And I mean, my answer to that like my simple answer to that, like as frustrating as the passing game and lack of production with receivers and all that has been, it's still to me more about the quarterback. Like I've never given a blanket defense of Riley Leonard and saying, like whatever he is or isn't as a passer, like that he gets a free pass for what's going on. I mean, most of it, I think, is more about Riley Leonard and whether or not he's going to pull the trigger than it is who's out there on the field. So like to me, that's why they're not in a huge rush to get Gilbert and Williams on the field right now.
I think it's multifaceted. I mean, on one hand, I see where you're coming from, Andrew. I do, because we heard nothing but great things, especially about Micah Gilbert and how ready he was to play at the college level in the spring. And you get into the fall, and there's just not a whole lot of appearances from him, if at all. Same thing with Cam Williams. On the flip side of that coin, one thing that I will say is, just from a fan standpoint, and what would happen is you start playing two true freshmen, and then the question is going to be, well, where's Jaden Greathouse? Where's Bo Collins? We just got him in from Clemson. Where, so
yeah,
I think there's a lot of things. I think fundamentally it's because they're both true freshmen, and there might be a facet of their game that just might not be developed as well. One thing that the Notre Dame wide receivers have actually done really well of so far this year has been downfield blocking, and maybe that is a facet of their game that hasn't fully developed yet. Or I guess I can't really say it's the extensive route tree that is asked to being run, because between pass protection and what we've seen from certain Riley Leonard limitations so far this year from game to game, they might not be able to push the ball where they need to. So I think it's a multiple different.
And I just think, like if you look at some of the plays that they made last week, like look at the touchdown in the way Mike Denbrock schemed that up, like the touchdown to Jaden Greathouse as the example, like you had Bo Collins and Jaden Harrison both out there who were, like taking the safety in one direction, and it leaves Jaden Great, like I'm not saying that hasn't happened on other plays, but then, like the key play on the third down conversion on the last touchdown drive to Jaden Harrison, again, great scheme, like I think that Mike Denbrock, with that comfort level that they have talked about between Denbrock and Riley Leonard, regardless of who the receivers are, if he just keeps doing more of that, like find a way to, to scheme some plays up, sometimes you're not going to have the perfect call because the other team might be in a good defense or they might just cover it well. But I just feel like with the athletes, again, like when you look at who Notre Dame is going to be playing in these secondaries that Notre Dame is going to be facing now here, really, probably at least until Virginia. I'm kind of curious to see if Virginia can hold up over this next month or so before they come in here to South Bend. They're off to a nice little start. I mean, my gut says they probably won't, but who knows? But I guess my point is, up until then, like these are all secondaries that Notre Dame's receivers, the guys who are on the field right now, Notre Dame and Riley Leonard and Mike Denbrock should be able to take advantage of them in a lot of different ways.
Yep, I agree.
Steven says, looking at Travis Hunter's full body of work, he seems like an explosive receiver and a suspect corner. He gave up 298 yards and 3 touchdowns to Ayon. Do you know how to say his name? The Stanford receiver. Say it again.
Ayo Manor.
Ayo Manor. Okay, I'd never heard it pronounced out loud before. So Steven says, what am I missing here?
I mean, Travis Hunter wasn't manned up on Ayo Manor the entire game last year. I think where a lot of that gets confused is, I will say, Ayo Manor had that one like touchdown on him where he literally mossed him and took it off of his back. So
it's just insane.
It is.
I mean, like I thought that was I didn't realize that he had that kind of game. I remember him having, like over 100 yards. I mean, that's almost a passing game, 294 yards.
No, that game he went crazy. Now, to be fair, looking at that stat line with a little bit of context, Travis Hunter, that was his first game back off of an injury. So, and I think the injury was something severe where I think he like lacerated his kidney or something, or his liver. It was something crazy. because of a shot that he took against Colorado State. So that was his first game back. I mean, it's suspect corner-ish. He has come into his own this year for sure. He is significantly better than he was last year. But Colorado was a team on defense last year, was abysmal. So, yeah, and Travis Hunter was the one shining light. So, I think it is mounted up. Now, you are definitely right. He is a very explosive receiver. So, I think this year it's more accurate to look at his full body of work this year than compared to who he was last year, because Notre Dame has had players who were not that great last year and are significantly better this year. So,
yeah. And also significant that A.O. Maynor also only had 2 other 100-yard games after that. So he had almost 300 yards in one game. And, this is going to, I'm not saying that Benjamin Morrison and or Christian Gray are just going to put the clamps on him and completely lock him down. Odds are, especially if Daniels is out there playing, they're going to hit a couple throws. They're going to make a couple of connections. The question is going to be, how much can you limit those kind of connections? He's probably, from a Stanford standpoint, their best, like those two guys, the quarterback and him, are probably their 2 best talents that you're going to see on the entire field.
Yep. But
again, it's like, can you prevent a one-man show from happening? You should be able to. If you're Al Golden and you have the kind of talent that he has at his disposal in the secondary.
100%.
Andrew wants to know if Al Washington has proven he can develop young talent. He says we're seeing a lot of new contributors.
I am going to chair that until after this next 3-game stretch, because this is when the young talent is really going to have an opportunity to shine. I think he's starting to get there for sure. Boubacar started to come into his own. He is still considered a young guy before the unfortunate knee injury. Junior Tuihalamaka is playing significantly better this year than what he did last year. Bryce Young is starting to show flashes and starting to come into his own. Logan Thomas is going to start being more of a feature in the pass rush. Josh Burnham is going to come back to full time. So I'm going to hold it for now, but I definitely think he's starting to answer some questions around his development as a coach, for sure.
Yeah, I have pretty good confidence that the answer is yes, because you mentioned Boubacar Traore, and then even though Jordan Botelho doesn't fit the mold of what you're talking about, he was still a guy who was excelling before his injury. But you look at Josh Burnham, and hopefully we're going to see him this weekend. He's supposed to be back, manning number 2 on the depth chart at both defensive end positions. And then Bryce Young has been pretty productive when he's been on the field. And Logan Thomas obviously had some flashes out there, had a pressure, nearly, like if they had kept with the original call, he would have had a touchdown on that blitz by Benjamin Morrison. So, I think the mix of this is just really good young talent that they have. And 2, you still have to show that you can get it done. So the interior, regardless of young or old, that is still a huge question mark in terms of Al Washington and just the team. What's going on with those interior guys? I think that size, a little more talent, will continue to solve that as they go forward, though, too. So, my inkling is to the answer is yes, because of those guys that you mentioned and I just mentioned, between Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore, Josh Burnham, they all fit that young guy mold. Logan Thomas as well. I think that the track record is at least starting to point in the right direction. Like you said, I think we need a little bit, just give us a little bit more. Show us a little bit bigger sample size to continue to prove it. Andrew also wants to know, in hindsight, did Chad Bowden deserve that raise and extension? No quarterback in the class, 2 months away from signing day. Only 1 true wide receiver in the class, 35th rated running back. No current commits from California or Texas.
I think if you look at it in a vacuum like that, no. It's not true to have only 1 true wide receiver in the class. It's just factually not correct? They have Elijah Burris and they have Jerome Bettis Jr., who were both true wide receivers.
Right.
And
what you think of their ranking and, all of that,
yeah,
that's going to fluctuate, obviously. Yeah.
Yep, totally. And the running back, like, you're just going to have some classes where, I mean, as far as running back talent goes, I think that their recruiting efforts would have been spent better elsewhere, because you already have Jeremiah Love, who has to come back for another year academically. You have, or eligibility wise, you have Jadarian Price, who probably is going to come back, I would imagine. And then you have two true freshmen in Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young. You still have Jabron Payne, who might come back after his ACL injury. So the running back one I'm not too hurt about. And as far as quarterbacks go, they relied heavily on Deuce Knight, but they have safeguards in place. They have quarterbacks that they went out to visit during the bye week. They have some that are, so I think that he did, based on what the class looked like last year too.
I mean, if you want to put the blame on Bowden for Deuce Knight, that's just it's another kind of a Peyton Bowen type situation, sure, honestly, from a couple of years ago. I mean, he was obviously committed for a long time, and for a long time publicly, he kept showing up at Notre Dame. Like, how many times did he show up at Notre Dame? Then he went with Riley Leonard and that whole crew, and was it late May, early June, down to Alabama to throw with them, all that different stuff. He was saying and doing all the right things, but then at some point he decided he was going to shop himself, and that's what it was. Like, this was Deuce Knight's decision. So like, you can't put that on Chad Bowden. They had an elite quarterback locked up in this class, but it just appears that at the end of the day, Deuce Knight decided he was not content to potentially sit behind CJ Carr for at least 2, if not 3 years, just depending on how things go with CJ Carr's career here at Notre Dame. Like, that's ultimately why Deuce Knight is not here. So that happens. Okay, now you've got to go out and you've got to try to find somebody to fill that slot, but they still have Noah Grubbs in the 26th class, and he's a pretty good one as well. So,
well, and I'm glad you brought that up. You also can't just look at like the areas where he missed, because it's recruiting. Like, that's just, ideally your recruiting class every year is just filled with 5 stars and it's the best class ever, but that's not the reality of recruiting. I mean, this year he got Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden and James Flanagan and Jadon Blair and Christopher Burgess. So like, he's still doing a good job. Now, I do agree with you that I would like to see more offensive people in there, but I mean, I'm not too worried about it, especially not the quarterback issue.
Right. So I was wondering if this was going to come up tonight, and then Tommy Guns just bebops right in, and he asks about the Rudy project. So have you seen any details on this yet, Trevor? The Rudy project, like this whole. No, it's the Super League. It's the Super League that Jack Swarbrick is involved with. And I was kind of saving this. I was going to save this for tomorrow's show. We can touch on it here, though. Let me see. I thought I pulled some notes. Where did I put it? Here it is. Okay. So Ross Dellinger from Yahoo had I read his article about this. It's essentially the Rudy project. It's the Super League. It's spearheaded by former Disney executives turned investment professionals. It's a Super League concept, separate and more simplified than the one made public last week. And I'm reading from Dellinger's article at Yahoo. It incorporates football programs of the 4 power conferences in a 70-team structure. The model preserves the 4 power conferences, expands the postseason, overhauls scheduling, tiers revenue distribution, and most importantly, he says, infuses as much as $9 billion of private capital cash into the system. So the basic, like the most impactful things in all of this is Project Rudy would arrange more games between power conference programs by eliminating all of the games against the group of 5 and FCS opponents. It would also, again, expand the playoffs, pit blue blood powers more often against each other. So you've got better TV matchups, basically, and consolidate the media rights of the 70 schools all under one agreement. So you've got a better, basically you've got better payout, than what you've got going on now, like more even payout across the board. It's essentially an NFL model that they're talking about pushing to. But again, like the conferences stay intact, but you're not going to play any group of 5 teams. You're not going to play any FCS teams. So I know that's a lot of information that I just dropped on you, Trevor, but like hearing that, what do you think about that?
I think it's an interesting idea. I think now, is Project Rudy specifically just for college football, or is that for every sport?
It's just for football.
Okay. I mean, to be honest with you, Tommy Guns, I can't give you a full opinion on it just because, as you just saw, I learned about it today.
You literally just learned about it. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting concept, and I understand why they do it, but I would have to know how many regular season games are going to be slated, because 12 straight games of Power 5 opponents is going to be that. I mean, that's...
Yeah, like how far are you going to expand the playoffs? Because that's, and again, you're trying to keep the conference structure in place. That to me is like, if you're going to do this and you're going to eliminate group of 5 and FCS games, it just feels like you just need to go back to a regional model, essentially like the NFL, where you've got, like an NFC West and an NFC East, and, all like you've got West Coast teams largely playing each other, and like you have some crossover with, with some of the other divisions or conferences or whatever. But I mean, if you're going to match these 70 teams solely against each other, naturally you're going, more losses are going to be a consequence of that, so like what we're used to seeing with 1 and 2 loss teams would seem like would be much more rare than we see right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting concept on paper. Execution wise, I have no idea how they're going to get that done. So we'll see.
Well, and look, I think it's an interesting concept, and what kind of adds another layer to it is Jack Swarbrick just retired a few months ago, and he is one of the people involved in this, in the discussions, the implementing, the coming up with ideas. So,
right.
Again, there's a Notre Dame angle in here. It feels like, well, if this potentially happens, someone like Jack Swarbrick, with his Notre Dame ties, a Notre Dame alum, obviously himself, and was just the athletic director, like he wants to kind of make sure that Notre Dame keeps its place at the table. So he's actively working on this with some of the money people. I think the biggest issue is and we'll get to the question about the NCAA and NLI here in just a second, but like the NCAA is a punchline, and especially with football, like the NCAA does not sponsor college football's national championship. The college football playoff does, and before that, the BCS, the Bowl Championship Series, sponsored the national championship. So like there's already a separation there. But if you pull all these football programs, essentially, I think what they're saying is you're pulling them away from the NCAA. Well, I mean, someone still has to run the thing. There still has to be, an overseeing body, an organizing body that's going to run this thing. Whether that means you're starting off with a commissioner and then you've got deputy commissioners branched out underneath. Like someone's still got to make rules and call the shots. It's just you're going to call them by a different name.
Sure.
Meet the same boss, same as the old boss. So like anyone who thinks that, you're distancing yourself from the NCAA, like that's going to accomplish something. There's still going to be somebody to oversee, whatever they end up with, no matter, what it ends up being. So, and again, I'll bring that back tomorrow because, again, like Trevor, just hearing that kind of on the fly. Vince will be in tomorrow as well, so we'll Vince and I will have a chance to kind of marinate on that stuff a little bit more. I mean, I will say, like, there is some intrigue to me because, I am an NFL fan, and I think that, just like the revenue sharing aspect of this, like when, look at what caused all this conference shuffling to begin with. It was the disparity in TV money. So if you can even that playing field out, I think that's a good place to start. And I think that's what a lot of people would like to see, is just evening that out so that if you're in the ACC, for example, and you're getting 30 million less a year than a Big Ten or an SEC team, I mean, there's a reason that Florida State and Clemson are wanting out. Tyler says, do you think some schools right now are regretting conference realignment? And thanks for the super chat, Tyler.
I don't know about regretting it. I mean, I'll have to go back through and look at what some of the conferences are. Like, I know who realigned, but I don't know. Are you asking, Tyler, like the teams that left their conference to join a new one, are they regretting it? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Because
did you see the James Franklin comments, for example? Like James Franklin was at his press conference the other day, was basically complaining about, well, we can't fly out of Happy Valley, because the airstrip is too short. We've got a bus an hour to go to Harrisburg, to fly to Los Angeles, and basically complaining about the flight time and the trip and all that different kind of stuff. Trust me, there are plenty of other schools that have to bus an hour to get to their airport, like third world problems. But I think the question is, do the schools regret it? There's a difference between the people running the schools and the coaches. Like I can understand James Franklin not being completely happy about it because of logistical stuff like that. But, like James Franklin, somebody else is signing his big fat check. And obviously, Penn State is taking its revenue, but those decisions were made above James Franklin's head. Trust me, nobody asked James Franklin about whether or not, he thought USC and Oregon and Washington should join the Big Ten.
I agree. Look, here's my takeaway from it. And this is obviously coming from a bias because Notre Dame travels all over the country every single year. I don't have any remorse for the Penn State football teams and, now we have to go out to California because Notre Dame has done that. I do have remorse for the other teams at that school, like, volleyball, basketball when that season comes up. The sports teams that play multiple games in a week.
In the middle of the week.
That's tough. I mean, you're asking, student athletes that are not a part of the football team at Washington, where any given week they might have to fly to Wisconsin for a Tuesday game and fly to Pennsylvania for a Thursday game and then come back home and play a weekend game on Saturday at home. So from a school standpoint, I think there's a lot of regret there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and it's those sports, it's the Olympic sports that are going to feel it a lot more than, football still only plays one day a week. And if you have to fly on Thursday instead of Friday to get to Los Angeles, you tell me the players aren't happy that they get to practice out in LA in the sunshine and chill out in the hotel for the rest of the day. I don't think there's going to be too many complaints about that. But, like as an example, with Stanford and Cal being in the ACC, like when you look at the basketball schedules, the way they're doing it on the women's side anyway is Notre Dame is going to host Stanford on Thursday night, and then they will host Cal on Sunday. And like if Notre Dame would have been playing, and when teams go out to the West Coast to play those two teams, the teams in the conference will do the same thing. So you have travel partners where Cal and Stanford are involved, because they're trying to cut down on some of the extra travel that's going to come with that. So you're not flying back and forth and all that. So you just, because they're both obviously right there in the Bay Area. So you kill two birds with one stone, but you also have to stay a couple extra days to accomplish that. So, Yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot more on the other sports than football.
Yeah.
Football drives the boat, but there's a lot more on them
Mm-hmm.
than the sport of football. Well, look who's here.
What is up, everyone?
It's the erstwhile Jesse Stiers joining in end of the mailbag. How are you today, sir?
My hiatus is over. I am back.
Your self-imposed hiatus. Jesse, Trevor, Jesse. I don't think you guys have ever actually met before, have you?
No, nice to officially meet you.
Yep, absolutely. Nice to meet you, man. How's the new job going?
It's good minus, an hour and a half commute round trip every day, but that's about it. But that's soon to change. Our new office is opening like a mile and a half away. So
fantastic.
That's going to be quite the time to sleep in.
Do we have a target date on when that's actually going to happen?
21st of October.
21st of October. Nice.
Okay, there we go.
Nice. All right. USMA. I mean, he's got his standards, Jesse. He's already calling for whiteboard today. You just get back and it's like, come on. What have you done for me lately? Give me some of that whiteboard.
I know. It's I haven't even thought about looking at Stanford quite yet.
All right. So we've got a few more questions in the mailbag before we get to rapid fire. Trevor, Anthony wants to know where you played college ball, and are you surprised at the hit rate of Chad and Marcus to this point with recruiting?
I'll answer the second part first. So, no, I'm not surprised. Marcus Freeman's a really good recruiter, and he's shown that throughout his tenure. As far as where I played college football, I did not. I stopped playing after high school. Too many concussions. And I was thinking about going to play at Trine University in Angola, and ultimately ended up choosing to go to school down at the University of Indianapolis, and ended up being a good decision because I met my wife there. So I can't be too upset about
good call.
That choice. So
good call.
My college defensive coordinator went to University of Indianapolis, and he set a lot of D2 records as a quarterback down there.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, UND's a good football program, man.
A very good D2 program.
They are.
Corey's coming at you, Jesse. He says that you look like you just woke up. I think the problem is you've been up all day, and you're not used to those early mornings actually driving to work that you've had to do with.
No, I've been drinking a considerable amount of coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I've been drinking coffee the last like 2 to 3 weeks, and I don't know how I don't usually like coffee because it makes me feel crappy by the time the afternoon comes, but if I don't drink it, I will be dragging throughout the day. So I've been having to drink some coffee in the morning.
All right. I'll throw this question at you from Tom. Do you foresee Mike Denbrock installing more screen and wheel route passes to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price out of the backfield? I mean, I think this is something that we've been waiting to see. We've finally got to see a big screen there against Louisville to Love a couple of weeks ago. What do you think about that?
I would hope that we would see some. It fits, it fits their offense. Any way that you can utilize the backfield between Leonard, Price, and Love, that's the best part of this offense right now. So the more that you can do with them in terms of the passing game and getting the ball out quick, I'm all about it. And I'd love to see some 2-back sets where you're kind of, faking to one guy and the other guy is basically running like a bubble or like a screen route into the flat, essentially, right? So you can utilize both of them at the same time. You can basically run a triple option with Leonard, Love, and Price, where one guy is the dive man, one in the quarterback is the keep man, and then the other back is the third option pass out of the backfield. So I'd love to see it, but I've been asking to see that for the last month or so.
Yeah, Trevor.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more screen passes. I would love to see a wheel route as well. Pass protection has to be there in order for that to happen, because that is more of a slower developing play, in my opinion. And there were some quick hits that Riley Leonard was taking on very fast, like very quick routes against Louisville. So would I love to see it? Absolutely. Do I foresee wheel routes? I'm going to share those expectations until I see how the offensive line plays on Saturday, but more screens for sure.
Hey, Trevor, was that you and I? Were we talking about, maybe a little speed option wrinkle in there? Were we talking about that
the other day?
Yeah, we talked about that on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, again, just like doesn't have to be a staple, but just an easy little wrinkle that you can incorporate. Every third series, even something like that, with what you've got with the running ability that you've got and those guys in the backfield. Josh says that Denbrock is somewhat handicapped with the O-line play and pass protection. I mean, but that's where screens should actually help you, because like you're essentially letting rushers go free, and then you're dumping the ball off and letting him work his magic and get himself downfield.
I'd like to see maybe even some tight end screens as well. The Cowboys the other day ran a nice play where they slipped their fullback into the flat on a screen, and it's those type of screen plays where it's not expected that I think are going to be the most, efficient. So obviously, yeah, like Price and Love are I guess your kind of key guys, your hot guys out of the backfield that catch a screen. But why not set up Mitchell Evans or I would prefer Eli Raridan to sneak out, someone who can get lost in the mix and catch, some sort of screen. Screens don't have to be exclusive to just the running backs, I guess is what I'm getting at. And the more that you can use guys down the depth chart, I think more you can catch teams off guard.
I mean, they use the wide receivers a lot, though. At least through the first few games, they've used the wide, like especially Bo Collins. Obviously, like he's been the most frequent target
it's tunnel
of screen passes.
It's those tunnel screens, and those have to be blocked to perfection.
Right,
and that's the frustrating part. Is I think there's more room for error when you kind of do like a backside type screen, right? Like it's. Not that Notre Dame is obvious about their screens, but they a little bit are, and you have to block them perfectly on the perimeter for them to work. And I think they've been struggling to kind of secure that last block on the perimeter.
Andrew. Trevor, what do you think about this? Andrew says, Notre Dame puts so many offensive linemen in the NFL. Why aren't we signing a top 5 running back every year?
I don't know. I mean, short answer, I'm not sure. The Notre Dame utilizes running backs. I mean, that's been the focal point of Notre Dame's offense really since,
16.
I was about to say you can make the argument since, Josh Adams took off and was doing his thing in 2017. So it's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. If I
think that they've been pretty solid, running back wise. They got, Audric Estime in the NFL. Theo Riddick is in the NFL. Wasn't it the brother?
I mean, they might not be top 5 guys, but just since Dylan McCullough has been here, I mean, look at the difference in the overall makeup of these running back rooms compared to 3-4 years ago. Like it's a lot different looking, right? Like the fact that you have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price both in the same backfield. I mean, and they were obviously both in the same backfield last year with Audric Estime as well. And I mean, if Price doesn't blow out his Achilles in the spring, coming out of the spring, going into his freshman year, like his career and his stock look a heck of a lot different right now. So, again, like I wouldn't get totally caught up in like he's got to be a top 5 guy. I mean, there's probably a pretty good chance that those guys want a lot more money and they might want it up front, the way things work right now.
Well, and another thing you have to keep in mind of too is if Notre Dame every single year recruited a top 5 running back, there's a good chance that half of them transfer out anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I mean, if every single year they're bringing in a top 5 running back, they can't all play. I mean, at least not to the capacity that we would want to see everybody. So it's my 2 cents.
I mean, right now too, it's
Tom,
like
I was just saying, Tom says Kyron Williams. I mean, obviously Kyron's good, but that's one guy. And again, like look at the makeup of the entire room when Kyron Williams was here versus now. You've essentially got 2 Kyron Williams, like that level, that caliber of player with Price and Love in the same backfield. And, again, like last year, I'm not saying that obviously Estime is the same kind of back as Kyron, but when you look at the ability level, you essentially had 3 of those guys last year. So, I mean, the overall makeup of the running back room, I mean, obviously you want as great a talent as you can get every year, but I'm not going to fret too much because I think that running back room, along with cornerbacks, like those two, the complexion of those rooms have changed the most over the last 3 years since McCullough and Mickens have been on the staff. So Joe, I forgot this was in here. He threw this in earlier. I don't know if you guys saw this. The NCAA is, he says, the worthless NCAA is getting rid of the national letter of intent. Now, again, there's more explaining that goes along with this. He wants to know what our thoughts are on that. Essentially, it's this. They're going to get, they're going to do away with what we know as the national letter of intent program, but they're basically like, recruits are still there's going to be a signing day. Recruits are still have to go, they're going to have to sign on the dotted line. It's just going to be because of the revenue sharing model that's coming. It's just going to be called something else. It's not going to be a national letter of intent. They're basically going to be signing contracts now instead. So it's not like it's just going to be this willy-nilly, like you can go right up until training camp starts and, signing free agents and stuff like that. There's still a signing day. You still have to sign on the dotted line. It's just going to be called something else. I don't know if you guys have anything else on that.
I didn't even know it was a thing, to be honest with you.
Just happened yesterday. So,
I mean, I like it if it eliminates. I don't know if my issue is necessarily around the national letter of intent. I think that there needs to be regulation around the transfer portal. I think there needs to be regulations around nil, but national letter of intent. I'll just have to read up more on what all that's going to entail before I have an opinion on it.
A lot of changes in the last day, and some of the other changes we're going to get to in rapid fire here in a little bit as well. Pat got in late. He says, when will we know about the starting quarterback at Stanford? We started the show with that, Pat, but don't worry because there are a lot more people here in the show right now than at the start because I don't believe we have two shows going at the same time here on IB. But Stanford head coach Troy Taylor, I believe it was yesterday, updated the Stanford Daily, reported that Ashton Daniels, who was injured in the Clemson game, didn't play against Virginia Tech, is going to be available for Saturday's game against Notre Dame. Now, whether or not he actually plays, who knows? But Troy Taylor says that Ashton Daniels is available. So there's your Ashton Daniels, Stanford quarterback update. Trevor, I'll let you start with this one. John wants to know, he had another post in there as well, why no Tosh Baker at left tackle?
I think that Tosh Baker didn't pan out the way that the team thought that he was going to initially. And I don't know if it was just a fear in the sample size that they had seen. I don't know if it's a fear of the sample size that they had saw from him at left tackle in 2021. Now, I don't believe that Tosh Baker is the same player that he was in 2021. But, John, if I could be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure of what the answer is, but I
would just say if they felt like Tosh Baker was good enough, he'd be playing. Tosh Baker had the first crack at it at training camp after Jagasaw's injury, and it was looking like that was going to be the guy. And everyone here was like, oh, we're going to be stuck with Tosh Baker starting at left tackle. And then they made the switch to Anthony Knapp. And after a few games, obviously, a lot of people aren't completely happy with Anthony Knapp. Understandably, he's got a lot of room to improve. But if Tosh Baker were good enough, just flat out, because I asked Marcus Freeman about Tosh Baker this week. Trevor, you and I played his comments on Monday. There was nothing that Marcus Freeman said. Like he talked about Tosh Baker as a great team guy, putting the team before himself, all those kind of things. I mean, that just sounds like a guy who is willing to suck it up and plug along, even if he's not the starting guy out there. He's played in a lot of games. Most of it's been on special teams. And, the starts against Purdue and Wisconsin, 3 years ago, like you talked about. But if they thought that Tosh Baker was better than Anthony Knapp, Baker would be out there, and like what we were able to see of Baker during training camp was, not a guy who was very fleet of foot. And I think that factored into the decision as well.
I think the answer is relatively simple. Knapp is younger. He's more athletic. Why would you invest your time in someone who's already kind of had a crack at it and who's going to be out the door soon? Why not? If the talent gap is relatively close, why
invest
not
the time in
a
someone
guy,
younger? Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to pan off. That's going to give you 3 solid years. And by the time his 3rd, 4th year comes around, he's, hopefully an NFL prospect, but he's younger. He's more athletic. He can move better. So I think Tosh Baker's time has unfortunately passed him. And so it just wasn't worth it anymore.
Correct. Trevor, you've been going for like 4 hours now. So the call is yours. You call the ball. Are you going to hang for rapid fire? Or do you need to get going?
I think I'm going to step away and get some dinner.
Okay.
Fellas.
Smart man.
Yeah, but I'm
stretch the legs.
Yeah, I was about to say, but you guys will kill the rest of it. I appreciate you having me on for the first part, Jesse. It was nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, you too. I'm sure we'll run into each other more frequently.
100%.
All right. Appreciate you, Trevor. Guys. Thanks a lot. Enjoyed it, as always.
Always.
Trevor Trowbridge is checking out. And with that, Jesse, I will ask you, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire. And, I've been waiting for this actual moment all day. It is a birthday fire. It is someone's birthday in the house. I went through the chat. I realized it wasn't noticed or brought up, and I figured what better time to say happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. I did notice, like I got a text from Vince today, and like other people I got texts from. Hadn't heard from my only son.
I was waiting for this moment. What better way to tell you than live face-to-face on the show?
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom, for the reminder. Hit that like button. I don't know what you're doing if you're just sitting there chilling, but hit the like button. Thank you very much, Josh. I wore this just for my birthday. I just got this Pearl Jam t-shirt. I like it because at the bottom it says alive. So, the older we get, that's, it's the simple things, right? Much appreciated for all the birthday wishes. Thank you very much, Jesse, as well. Let's get down to some business, though, because it's been a couple of weeks since you've done some rapid fire. So, Irish defensive back Jordan Clark spoke with the media after practice Tuesday. Not surprisingly, what do you think came up? The unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that he got for his headbutt against Louisville a couple of weeks ago. Here is what Jordan Clark said. Now, I'm combining a couple of different quotes here, so there's kind of a lot, but I'm combining them just so you know that it wasn't just like one long continuous quote. But he says, ultimately, I can't cost my team 15 yards regardless of what happens. I'm never going to let somebody spit on me. I'm never going to let anybody punch me, but 15 yards is unacceptable. Coach Free and I talked about it with Coach Golden and Coach Mick. I don't want to hurt my team in any way, but I'll never let anybody spit on me or punch me in my face. After he spit in my face, I told the official, Coach Free told the official, I guess he said that he didn't see it and he didn't do anything about it. Ultimately, that's out of my control. Football is a very physical game. I have ample time between the whistle to figure things out and handle things that way. That's what I'll do next time. And that's a quote from Jordan Clark. So, Jess, satisfied with that response?
Yeah, I am satisfied with that response. And, I get it. It's a tough spot to be in, but you can never react during a game. I think that's a situation that ultimately you handle when the game is over. If you got something to say or, if you want to get into any other extracurriculars, I think you wait until it's not going to affect the game and maybe, potentially the outcome of a drive, et cetera, et cetera. So I get it. It sucks. Like no one wants to be spit on. And I think a lot of people have morals and values. But if you told the referee and the referee said he didn't, see anything, they're not going to change it. They're not going to just, randomly throw a 15-yard penalty. You just kind of have to get over it, be the bigger person. And again, after the game, you could probably say something or maybe slap the guy on the head or, whatever you want to do, just not during the game.
I mean, literally, if you wanted to get into a fight after the game, there's no penalty to be there's no flag to be thrown at that point, right? But like I've said all along. I mean, the best remedy, especially you're in a close game the way they were, all those different things. And I know that it can be hard when something like that happens, because I don't think that there are many things that are more disrespectful than literally one man or one person spitting in another person's face, So like, I understand the anger that Jordan Clark must have had, but just like he said, and like the conversation obviously went with his coaches, 15 yards in that situation when you're trying to win a game, when Louisville's, that close to mounting a comeback, that could have been a huge, huge call in that game. And they're fortunate, one, because of his play, because he was playing so well also, but they're very fortunate that they were ultimately able to overcome that, hold on, and win the game. But I think, he said the right things. He did the right things. And now he's just got to show that if it happens again, which I would have to say there's probably a pretty good chance that it will, because other teams find out that you can kind of get in this guy's head. I imagine, hopefully you don't see guys, spitting at anybody, but I think that they're going to be trying their best to get into Jordan Clark's head and see, what they can prompt out of him. But his response, that's all you can ask. And I mean, I also think, like, I was quite honestly a little surprised when I saw that Jordan Clark was going to be on the, player availability list, because you knew this was going to come up. So like, I commend Notre Dame for making him available and Jordan Clark for making himself available to come out and answer these questions about that, because it's college and you don't have to come out, like you're in the NFL. If you don't want to talk to the media, you don't have to. So I appreciate the fact that he did come out and address it. And, again, he said the right thing. So good enough. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. So Fighting Irish running back Jadarian Price was benched for the rest of the game after his first half fumble against Louisville. Here's what Marcus Freeman said about Price's response this week.
We have a lot of confidence. He'll respond the right way. There's obviously Coach McCullough and our program has standards for the running back room and holding on to the ball, and similar with what happened with Audric last year when we played Navy. And but Jadarian and Price will be the first one to come up here and tell you that's the standard of that room, is to always hand the ball to the official. And but there's so much confidence we have in him as a running back, and giving him the ball. And he's going to do great things this week and future weeks moving ahead.
All right, so there's Marcus Freeman on Jadarian Price. Are you good with Price? This is something, it's like we've had a bye week. So like every issue that came up during the Louisville game, you essentially have 2 weeks to talk about it instead of just one. This came up on the Champions Lounge within the last couple of days. Are you good with Price sitting out the rest of the game after the fumble, Jess?
No, I'm not good with that. I do believe, you can set a standard in your room, and all of that. But if they were going to bench Jadarian Price, I would have liked to see an uptick in Jeremiah Love's carries and less Aeneas Williams, if we're being honest with you. I thought Aeneas Williams was on the field too much. He was on the field too much during critical drives, critical third downs. And I just don't like it. I think you can. I think I would have been okay with like a quarter. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe a half until halftime, and then he comes back out in the second half, just enough to kind of sit down, de-escalate from the situation, get refocused, and kind of build up that hunger to kind of come out and do good again. But I don't see the good in the rest of the game, because I think ultimately you're hurting your team. And I think that Notre Dame is better with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love on the field. So I would have liked to see a quarter.
Yeah, I've got no problem with it. If that's the standard that Dylan McCullough wants to set for the running back room, and like Freeman said there in that soundbite, the same happened to Audric Estime before. Like if it's good enough for Audric Estime, essentially it's good enough for anyone. And there's a couple of different comments that we have here. Andrew says they treat Price so poorly. He's averaging less than 10 carries per game. He's the second best player on the offense. I mean, Love is still only averaging 11 or 12 carries per game, so it's not like he's getting a whole lot more. That's just the split right now. The fact that those two are splitting so much time, to your point, Jess, I would have liked to seen more of Jeremiah Love as well. But obviously, I guess they felt like they didn't want to, overtax him in that game. But if you're trying to win a game, I think that your best players need to be on the field at crunch time. And if Price was benched as the result of the fumble, then it should have been more Jeremiah Love. So, like, I get your point. Like, it shouldn't be as much Aeneas Williams, but it should have just been more Love and not necessarily Price. And then Tommy says running back fumbled and he's out the rest of the game. Quarterback fumbles and crickets. Peanut. Well, you don't bench a quarterback for an interception either. Like unless it's a rash of interceptions. Like let's not act like there's not a difference between the quarterback and literally any other position on the field. Like there's a difference if the quarterback fumbles and if the running back, the wide receiver, whoever it is, happens to fumble. Do you agree?
I do agree. Sorry, my dogs were ferociously barking. I didn't want anyone to have to hear that.
Well, so Price was benched for the rest of the game. Should Clark have been benched for his personal foul? Like, what do you think about that aspect of it?
No, I don't think that you should be benched. Well, for this personal foul, no. If you just, punch someone in the face or get into a brawl type situation, I think that's something that could land you on the bench for the rest of the game. But, you can't start doing that because then are you going to bench guys for every personal foul? And then it kind of becomes, well, these personal fouls mean more than these personal fouls. So it's just like you're getting into a bad, like a roughing the passer.
You can't bench everybody over the course of the game. Like ball security is one thing. A mental error is another thing. And that's essentially what a personal foul is. It's a mental error. It's a lapse in judgment is what it is. You're not making the decision to fumble the ball or throw an interception. Those are physical mistakes. It's a mental lapse in judgment that led to the personal foul. So, and again, like where Notre Dame was with its secondary, with the depth and who was available, like, do you want to win the game or not? D'Lo McCullough had the luxury of benching Jadarian Price. Like there's a difference on the other side. Yeah, that's exactly right, Andrew. They are thin at DB.
I think that the whole fumbling thing is so overrated, if we're being honest with you.
Are you mad? Are you mad at Vince and your freshman high school running backs coach for the fumble that came up on the show last week? Are you still bitter at them?
Not bitter at them. I am bitter that it ended my offensive career. I thought that was a little bit dramatic, and I thought I'll just never forget what was said to me on the bus after the game as an analogy of what fumbling was like. It's not really repeatable on this show, but it was. I mean, it's funny to look back on, but I mean, seriously, unless a guy is fumbling like every single game or it's like a known issue, I just don't see the whole point of benching someone. Like, again, no one is perfect. Quarterbacks throw interceptions. Running backs are occasionally going to fumble. It's not like Jadarian Price has a fumbling issue where he's, fumbled before. And so I don't like that overall mentality. I see NFL guys like Kyron Williams fumbled this past Sunday, and they gave him the ball right, on their next drive. They gave it right back to him. And I get it. It's the NFL. They're professionals. But I think it's a little bit childish, if we're being honest, to bench a guy just because of a fumble.
I mean, if you have a certain standard, you have to find a way to reinforce, whether positively or negatively, what is going to bring about that behavior. And obviously, if you want to play, you're going to think twice about your ball security. If the result is you sit out for an entire game. And again, it worked with Audric Estime before. Like, remember he had 2 years ago against Stanford, he had that fumble and then he sat out after that. He paid the price. He learned his lesson. Again, like the whole reinforcement thing, this is same but different. But like when you were young and you were playing Pop Warner football, the thing that, like officials are always going to miss calls, it's like, oh, you like holding or motion or offsides, whatever. But the thing that annoyed me the most, and this continued even into high school is things like a late hit out of bounds, a helmet to helmet contact that the officials would not call. And it's, like, again, like at the Pop Warner level, their excuse is, well, they're young, they're still learning. Well, my point would be, if you don't want them, if the emphasis is because you don't want helmet to helmet hits. So if you want to discourage a young football player from making a helmet to helmet hit, what's the best way to start to reinforce that? You have to throw the flag. You can't just let it go. Otherwise, it's just going to go on all the time. And, again, same but different, but I really don't see a whole lot of difference with the fumble thing. If you're emphasizing ball security and you don't want your guys to fumble, I don't have a problem with them handling it in that way.
I get what you're saying. I just think the rest of the game is extensive. I'm okay with the series or a quarter. I don't think it needs to be the entire game, considering the leverage of the moment and needing your best players on offense.
Sure.
That's where I'm at.
Yep, I get that as well. And I think Vince kind of took that same stance as well, even if he was completely still willing to throw you under the bus for your misgivings as a freshman fullback.
The one mistake I ever made, like it was, and let's just throw it out there too, and it probably wasn't stated. It was raining that day. It was a rainy game. The ball was slick the day I fumbled. It wasn't like the perfect.
Well, it was slick when Price fumbled
conditions.
As well. It was slick when Price, it was rainy out there too. Yeah. Okay, so here's Mike Denbrock on Riley Leonard during the bye week. Quote, I think what's most exciting to me is the continued growth of confidence and understanding of what we're doing. I think we've seen kind of glimpses of what it can really kind of turn into and become here. And we're at about the point in the season where it's time for that to kind of kick into gear. I've seen that progress over the last couple of games. Now that's continued into last week, continued into this week, and hoping that translates to the way we play on Saturday. End quote, Mike Denbrock. So, Jesse, that says blank to you.
That says that Riley Leonard wasn't ready to run this offense at the beginning of the season. What Denbrock to me is saying is I think he had, a pretty extensive, expansive playbook. And, we all know Riley Leonard had to sit out a spring ball. And I think fall camp wasn't enough for Riley Leonard in terms of integrating the offense and kind of, synchronizing their relationship of what plays work for Riley Leonard, what plays are going to work for Mike Denbrock. And allowing, Riley Leonard to ultimately grow in this offense. I just think that they needed a little bit more time, some time to kind of some trial by error, if we're being honest, right? And the first trial by error that happened was the NIU game, and we all saw how that game ended. But on the flip side of that, I think it's something to be excited about, because I think that I seriously believe from NIU until the last game of the season, Riley Leonard's progression is only going to get better and better. He's only going to be a better quarterback game by game. And if he does show regression consistently, then I think it's something to worry about, right? But I think that NIU game really stuck out because Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard just weren't on the same page of this is what works and this is what doesn't work, right? And so now that they've had this time to, especially with the bye week, to get healthy, to, get more into the playbook and have those discussions about what's good and what's not good, I think that's going to go a long way for Riley Leonard.
Yeah. Mike Denbrock was telling us all along, like going back to fall training camp, that this might take a while. I think that we overlooked a lot of it because we looked at Riley Leonard's talent, and quite frankly, we kind of overlooked the fact that he missed the entire spring and that things were still coming together. But again, Mike Denbrock was telling us this in training camp when he said, week 6 or 7 is going to look a lot different than week 1 or 2. And he didn't come out and say the things like, well, we've got to get on the same page, even though he did, a week or 2 into the season. It might have been after NIU we started hearing more of that about we've got to get on the same page. And it sure appears that they are much closer to the same page right now. And if you look at the calendar, even though this is game 6, it is week 7 because, they had some time during the bye week to practice as well. So like, to me, it means, again, like I'm not expecting all of a sudden that we're going to see, Kenny Stabler out there or John Elway, like just winging it downfield and hitting all these deep shots. But I am expecting that we're going to start to see a more efficient looking Riley Leonard and a more efficient and balanced looking Notre Dame offense. And it starts with this week. So I think this is a really big week for both of them, because as Trevor and I were talking about at the start of the show, like this is an opportunity against this specific opponent that you have to take advantage of. This is not a game that should be particularly close, and it would be a major disappointment if it is particularly close, like a fourth quarter game, like we're coming down to the wire, like a 10-point game or something like that. So it's a really big opportunity for Notre Dame's offense and Riley Leonard to step up.
Well, it's an opportunity as a whole for the team. Stanford is, what they've been the last 5 to 10 years is not what they were the previous 10 to 20 years before that. But Stanford is still a consistent opponent on the schedule. They are a rival. And it's something, regardless of record, you should take pride in showing up and playing a good game. Again, regardless of how good or not good Stanford is.
So, whoops, I had something wrong there. NCAA and Indy Sailor, I saw your comment. We did talk about the NLI stuff before you got here, but we'll readdress that now that we're getting into some of this stuff. So the NCAA approved some different changes yesterday. One of them is to keep both the winter and spring transfer portals for college football. So they're not going to eliminate the spring transfer portal. You're still going to have a winter portal in December. You're still going to have a spring portal in April, but they're going to shorten it. The winter portal is going to be 20 days. It'll run from December 9th, which is the Monday after the conference championship games. It'll run through December 28th. The spring portal is going to be open for 10 days from April 16th through the 25th. So, do you buy or sell this move?
I ultimately buy this move. I like the idea of having a portal at the end of the season. You have a full body of work. You can assess, where you kind of stand and what the best move is for you. And I like the spring portal as well because, you have a good idea coming out of spring practice where you are in the depth chart going into the fall, if we're being quite honest, right? And if you are at that 3 or 4 spot, or maybe not even, maybe you're in that 5 spot, there's just so many opportunities these days with NIL and with the transfer portal that you can go somewhere and play, even if it's at, a lower level school or whatever the circumstance might be. My only rule with the portal would be, I just wish that if you transferred, you had to stick it out for a certain amount of period of time. I don't like guys who are just transferring, basically at the semester. Like they could be at 2 schools within an academic calendar year. I think within the academic calendar year, you should be held to you have to stay at a place for like a full season, essentially, right?
Well, then what's the purpose of having the winter portal? If what's the purpose of having the winter portal if you're going to say and you should have to stay for the entire year?
Because that's what I mean. I think that like it still could be avid. Like say you transferred in last winter, then you shouldn't be able to leave in the spring portal. You should have to wait until the next winter portal comes up, and vice versa.
Okay.
Like if you come in during the spring portal, I don't think that you should be able to leave, basically at that December portal. I would like it where you leave the portal if you do decide to leave in the same portal that you came essentially a year later.
I see what you're saying. So if you transfer one spring, you have to wait till the next spring to leave,
right,
if that's what you decide to do, rather than just like you play one season and then middle of the year you can bolt again. I get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Chronicles of Narnia. These guys are just going in and out of the door whenever they want. I just think that there should be, some sort of obligation to kind of, be at that school for a term and whatever that term length would be.
The Chronicles of Narnia. So I will buy this because I do think there needs to be 2 portals. You need the December portal to give guys the opportunity, if they want to transfer, to head out and, join a new team and be able to go through spring practice with them. but I also feel like you still need this spring portal. That was what I couldn't get past when they were talking about, like, you still need to be able to give these guys the opportunity after you go through spring and you're competing for a job and you find out where you are on the depth chart. You still have to give them an opportunity to head out if that's what they decide to do. So, so I like this. I don't think it should create, that much change by shortening the windows on these portals. I think that ultimately you needed to keep both, and that's what I was, most looking at. Were they going to keep the spring portal? It just feels like you needed to have both of them. I get what you're saying about, you need to, like, if you come in one winter portal, you have to wait to the next winter portal, or, spring and spring. But I definitely think they needed to keep both of them around. Now, we did talk about this during the mailbag, but we'll go ahead and bring this up again. ND Saylor says, just got here. Any discussion earlier on the NCAA's elimination of the national letter of intent? We did talk about it a little bit. And the big thing with this, ND Saylor and anyone else who maybe joined late, is the reason they're getting rid of, the NLI, what has been known for 60 years as the National Letter of Intent, is because the model is going to change in college football because of this revenue sharing model that they're going to. Now, it's not going to be a system where no one is signing to go to Notre Dame or Alabama or Miami or anybody else, and like it's some kind of willy-nilly free agent system where you wait until training camp starts and you're signing free agent contracts and that kind of stuff. There is still going to be a signing period, and players will still sign their commitments to their schools, but instead of calling it a national letter of intent, it is essentially, they'll have a different name for it, and it's, going to be some kind of contract, basically, because of the revenue sharing model that's coming. So they're like, guys are still going to sign. I say, because we're talking about football, guys are still going to sign regardless of sport. Players are still going to sign on the dotted line. It's just not going to be called a national letter of intent anymore. There's going to be some formal, whether they actually literally call it a contract or not, they're just going to call it something else because there's going to be money involved now with the revenue share. So that's why they're changing the name. Robert Saleh, Jess, became the first NFL head coach to be fired this season. Who is next on the hot seat, do you think, as you shift in and out of the darkness and the light?
I would say, really, this is fun. I think that outside of the Commanders, the entire NFC East is kind of on watch between Sirianni, McCarthy, and Dable. I mean, seriously.
I had forgotten about Sirianni because I kind of made a little short list in my head. I forgot about, but he's got to be on there as well.
They have done nothing but regress since their Super Bowl appearance. And I would say that felt like the 2016 Cubs to me. A team that, yes, even though the Cubs won the World Series, I felt like their window was more so 2 to 3 years, and they didn't really capitalize on the window. And I think the same goes for the Eagles. And I think Sirianni thinks he's a great coach who's always making the right decision in the right moment. And I think he overthinks it. Instead of, there's a lot of going for it instead of taking points. He's a very arrogant-minded coach who is willing to take the risk a lot. And I'm okay with that, but I still think risks need to be calculated. And I still feel like the Eagles did not fully, capitalize on their window, essentially. And then when it comes to the Giants, I mean,
if they're even hovering around 500, because they obviously signed Jalen Hurts to a long-term contract. I mean, I think they're going to keep the quarterback over the head coach at this point.
Yeah, and I think that the way that I think they are they're one of the best run organizations in football. They have a GM that actively tries to trade, that is good at, their contracts. I just think that the coach is replaceable at this point. And then, with the Giants, it's like, how long are you going to let them be bad? They haven't shown any signs of, getting better. In my opinion, the best thing they got for him is Malik Neighbors, and he's currently, hurt right now. And then Mike McCarthy in Dallas, I just, you can't continue to be around a 500 team and lose in the first round of the playoffs. It's an organization that hasn't done anything since 1996. So,
yeah,
there's just you got to be better. And then outside of the NFC East, I think Zach Taylor for the Bengals is ultimately on the hot seat as well.
I think he is too.
A team that went to the Super Bowl, and I get it. Joe Burrow's been hurt, and the situations that they've had at offensive line and wide receiver. But again, they just at some point you can't continue to regress. They're 1-4 this season. They should have beat the Commanders. They should have beat the Patriots. There's no reason that the Bengals should be 1-4 right now.
Isn't that the Patriots' only win, or did the Patriots win last weekend? I can't even remember now. I mean, they obviously won to open the season, but the Patriots have been horrible ever since then.
Yeah.
So,
and then someone in the chat brought up the Browns. I don't think the Browns are
Stefanski's, I mean, Stefanski's a two-time coach of the year, including last year, because he got to the playoffs with Joe Flacco. They just saddled him with the wrong quarterback. That's not his fault, but that's the
their
history.
Organization is
that's the history of the Browns is going with the wrong quarterback. So
I don't think it matters who would be the coach of the Browns right now. They're just not really well run, and like you said, they're stuck with a quarterback that no one wants. I think Jameis Winston would give them a better opportunity at winning right now.
Yeah. I've actually heard Mike McDaniel in hot seat talk.
No.
It's like they lost too much on defense, and then obviously Tua gets hurt. There's no way you can pin that on McDaniel in that short amount of time. What they lost from defense from a year ago, there's no way that he's on the hot seat. But like the one that the two maybe that are the most connected are, what happens in New York with Daboll, and then Chicago and Matt Eberflus, because I'm just not convinced that Matt Eberflus is a head coach. And now, granted, there are issues with the Chicago Bears that, most of it has to do with the fact that they'd never draft offensive linemen in the first round, and they should have drafted a stud offensive lineman rather than a wide receiver, a Dunze, that high in the draft. But, everyone falls in love with the quarterback receiver combo. What's that done for him so far? What's Rome Odunze done so far? Nada. But I'm still not convinced, watching that Hard Knocks, there was nothing that screamed like, this is the guy when I was watching Matt Eberflus, and connect that to Daboll. Like, if I'm the Bears, I'm sitting back and I'm watching do the Giants stick with Daboll? They probably will, because I think that they'll, give him at least one more year after this. But if the Giants decided to move on from Brian Daboll and I'm the Chicago Bears sitting there, I would make that move in a heartbeat to pair him up with Caleb Williams. But Doug Peterson in Jacksonville is another one that I'd put on the hot seat, but I agree with the list that you had as well. Like Peterson, 9-8 the last 2 years, 1-4 this year. I mean, it's still crazy to believe that guy won a Super Bowl not that long ago. How about college? Who's got the hottest seat in college, do you think, right now?
The obvious answers are Napier and Norvell, the Florida and Florida State head coaches. So I'm not even going to really get into that.
I don't think Norvell, though. I think Norvell gets a pass for this year, but Napier for sure. For sure.
I would say at the moment, Hugh Freeze down at Auburn. I think it was controversial and kind of a risk to bring him in, and it hasn't paid off. And, obviously Auburn's in the SEC. I do believe that, those those boosters want to win now. And you're talking about an Auburn program that, they're always, while they might not be relatively great every season, they're not bad. You know what I mean? There's a difference between a bad team and a team that's it's still objectively good. And I just feel like Auburn is pretty bad right now. And then the other name that came to mind.
Just to your point, they were 6-7 last year in Hugh Freeze's first year. They're 0-3 in the SEC right now, 2-4 overall. In his first three head coaching stops, Liberty, Ole Miss, Arkansas State, he had winning records right out of the gate, but he is not moving the needle at all in Auburn so far. And when you look at all this other external stuff that comes with it, good luck Deuce Knight.
Yeah, and then the last one that I would say is, yeah, and that's okay. That's the part about Deuce Knight that is so confusing to me is like Notre Dame at least has a proven track record of consistency, and what you can develop into and the educational aspect. What is Auburn showing you right now that's like, man, I really want to go there? You know, like that's the
Yeah.
really confusing part to me on the side of Deuce Knight. And if you think
Just
about it,
honestly,
like that,
the ability to play right away, apparently.
and the
And the money. Yep.
And so if that's what you want to take, more to you, but I just feel like that's not the best decision for Deuce Knight at the end of the day. But the next coach that I would say is Mac Brown at North Carolina.
Yeah. I feel
think
like
his
he's going
time
to
is
just
up, and
retire. Yeah.
he had Drake May, you know, like that covered a lot of stuff for him. Like their defenses were so bad, but at least they had Drake May on offense where they could get in shootouts and win majority of these games, right? But no Drake May. I don't think he's the recruiter that he used to be. I think he's getting, old age is catching up to him. And there were rumors that he was already going to be done a couple of weeks ago. So I just feel like it's gotta be Mac Brown.
Yep. I agree. He's at the top. Somebody said Ryan Walters. He sure seems like he's on the hot seat right now at Purdue. Jeff says add Lincoln Riley to the mix if they end up 7-5 or worse. I think he puts himself on the hot seat going toward next year if that happens, but I don't think like his job is on the line if they end up 7-5 or worse this year. It would obviously be a step back each of the last 2 years after the first year that they had when they went to the Cotton Bowl. But I don't think Riley, I don't think his job is on the line right now. Like that is still a program that's got to be rebuilt now to compete in a more physical conference than they were used to competing in. I mean, hello, Minnesota.
I saw something the other day that Lincoln Riley has the same record in the first 30 games as what Clay Helton had at USC, but it felt like USC ran out Clay Helton for some. And all I'm going to say on the USC note is they haven't gotten it right since Pete Carroll left. They've got the names. They've gotten Lane Kiffin. They've gotten Steve Sarkisian. They've gotten, Lincoln Riley. To me, it's more of maybe an administration or athletic department issue and not necessarily a head coach issue. Because when
it absolutely is. Yeah.
I mean, look at the success
because they've gone through a lot of athletic directors in the meantime as well.
So, and I get it. Lane Kiffin also had stuff going on outside of football, but I mean, look at what he's done at Ole Miss. Look at what Sarkisian has done. At Texas, obviously, Ed Orgeron was an interim head coach. We saw what he did, at LSU and winning it. Like there have been good coaches that have gone through USC since Pete Carroll. So I think it's more of the whole program and not necessarily who the head coach is at the end of the day.
I can't disagree with that. I'll just add one other guy to the list, Dave Aranda down at Baylor. He's on his way to his third straight losing season. They're 0-3 in the Big 12 right now after winning the Sugar Bowl just 3 years ago. That the year that what would that have been? 2021, the year that Marcus Freeman ended up taking over. Remember Oklahoma State and Baylor played in the Big 12 championship game that year, and Notre Dame obviously ended up playing Oklahoma State in the Fiesta Bowl. But it's been from 12-2 to now this is going to be losing season 3 in a row for Dave Aranda. So I think that he is pretty hot right now as well. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't make it through the entire season, because that's like for a school, other than obviously the men's and women's basketball teams have won national championships, fairly recently, but like that's a school with big time expectations for no more, overall accomplishments than that school has from an athletic standpoint. They've got big expectations. They've sunk a ton of money into it, and money's going to ultimately talk. So I think Dave Aranda is pretty hot right now as well. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight, Jess. It was good to have you back.
Birthday edition.
That's right. You should have lit a candle maybe and brought it in. You almost look like your face is candlelit right now.
Yeah, this is like the worst time of the year when it starts to get dark earlier in the day, because then my natural lighting goes down. And I haven't had the opportunity to set up my like new in-home kind of workstation. When I left the old job, I had to give a lot of my equipment back. And so I don't really have a work from home setup right now at the moment. It's just me and the laptop.
Yes, and I've tried to tell you before, the backlighting with the window behind you doesn't do any favors either. So
It's the only spot in the room or in the house that I can really go.
all right, that's going to do it for tonight. Good questions in the mailbag tonight. Don't forget, tomorrow is We In, We Out Thursday. We start tomorrow's show with some comments from Marcus Freeman from his noon Zoom media call, and then we will have some We In, We Out. And of course, we wrap it up with rapid fire as well. So look for that thread on the new Champions Lounge tonight to submit your We In, We Out questions, and then we'll answer them tomorrow. Good stuff. Hit that like button, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.